Hey, everyone.
Hey there, folks. This is Rita.
This is Amanda, and you're listening to I Don't Know Her,
the podcast about women that you've probably never heard of, but you should have, and today you will.
So we recorded our last two episodes before the world became on fire.
Yeah.
So just want to put that out there for those of you who listened to those last two episodes and thought, man, those ladies are tone deaf. And by ladies, I mean people, because I'm not one.
I hopefully nobody was thinking like, read the room. You know, there's other stuff going on.
Just to those of you who haven't been following us, you've probably already seen on our Instagram page that we do have on our profile up in the highlights section. We have kept all of our stories that featured Black podcasters. So please go through those and check out some that might be pertinent to your own interests.
Oh, and there's such a variety. There's so much stuff. So like lifestyle stuff, music,
tarot
art.
readings.
Yes. So there's lots of good stuff on there. And if you're looking for something to help contribute to amplifying Black voices, this is one thing you can do.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of the ones that I found through this, because basically what we did is we went onto a podcast group that we're a part of online, and I said, hey, we want to feature Black podcasts. Does anybody have one in here that you would like to share? And then it was just, I mean, we've got well over 50.
Yeah, there's more than 50. I counted. I lost track after 50. I did, because I'm insane.
Because I was the one redoing, posting all of them. It felt like hundreds to me because it was a lot of work. Mm-hmm. But it was meaningful to me, and I was glad to do it. But two of the ones that I immediately was like, my eyes were like, yes. One was the Gaily Prophet.
Yes.
Which is a Harry Potter podcast by two queer people of color, which is great. I think they're both queer, both gay, but let me start that again. I think they're both people of color, but I don't quote me on that. And then the other one was Two Bad Queers.
Hey, that's us.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said. From Two Bad Queers to Two More. There was also one called, it was Two Black Girls or Well-Read Black Girls. I can't remember what the exact name is. If you go to the highlights, you'll find them. That one looked really interesting to me too. So I've been checking out all of those podcasts that were like hitting my buttons today.
Although I'm not really sure about how I feel about J.K. Rowling anymore.
Oh, let's talk.
Okay.
That's who I wanted to nominate as the Queen of Caucasity forever, maybe?
So myself.
Like Hall of Fame.
I had no idea what a fucking TERF she was.
Yeah. And will be forever.
Yeah. And adamantly, aggressively pushing that as the way that it should be. And I had no idea she had feelings like that.
I knew that she was a TERF because I've been on Twitter long enough to have seen the trans people that I know, especially the ones who are Harry Potter fans, talk about it.
Oh.
And be like, oh, look, J.K. Rowling's on her bullshit again. And so I've seen her, I stopped following her after after somebody had posted about it, and I was like, oh shit, I had no idea. I don't pay attention to her tweets. They're not, in fact, even when I was following her, she very rarely showed up on my feed because you know how it's curated based on what you react to.
Yeah.
So most of the people I end up seeing on my Twitter feed are Black queer people of color artists and writers. It's very specific.
And I'm not on Twitter at all, so I never saw any of that.
Yeah, I feel like if you weren't on Twitter, you'd probably would never have known, except that she put out basically an anti-trans fucking manifesto this week.
Yes, she did.
And I just want to say that it is peak white woman to distract from the Black Lives Matter movement by also throwing trans people under the bus. It's unconscionable that this is the moment in time that she decides to derail every conversation so that she gets her anti-trans views in. And it pisses me off.
And her platform is so fucking huge. And the people that she can influence and that she has influenced, that is such an abuse of what she has created that she could be using for good. And instead she's using it for this shit.
And she's going hard. And she keeps looping in lesbians and feminism as the reasons that she is anti-trans.
Yes.
And I just want to say right now that if your feminism isn't trans inclusive, it's not fucking feminism.
No, it is not.
If your feminism is also not intersectional with Black people and other people of color, you're not a feminist. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Cut and dry, period. And it's like, I almost feel like in her tone and like her verbiage that she uses, she almost feels like she's acting like she's being personally attacked. And so she's attacking back.
Absolutely. This is white fragility as well, right? Like, because people are saying you're wrong and it's really shitty of you to use this giant platform you have to push these exclusionary views. She's like, wait a minute. I'm the one being attacked. I'm just defending my right to exist as a woman. That is some bullshit. It's gaslighting too.
Yeah. The way I did see her tweet that she said trans women are basically erasing women from history. And I was like, how is that when history has erased so many trans women? Yes, people in general.
Yeah, it is think about the people we've talked about on this show where we're like, they could have been trans. I don't really know because that language didn't get to exist then. Like people weren't allowed to even express that that's who they are. And then once they were found out, like we've talked about Billy Tipton multiple times. He was a jazz musician. He ended up living here in Spokane, but he was a national celebrity. And when he died, it was suddenly, quote unquote, revealed that he had been born, he had been assigned female at birth, right? But that's not the way the media portrayed it. It was that he was a gender traitor and he was this and he was that. And let me just tell you that don't loop lesbians in with TERFs. That may be the case for some lesbians who are assholes, but for the most part, lesbians have been the original gender traitors.
Yes.
Like I have a button that says that because I know that like lesbians have, especially butch lesbians, studs, and then, you've got your whole non-binary spectrum. And there are trans lesbians. Like you don't get to tell. Anyway, it's the whole situation is very, very, very frustrating.
Yeah.
And again, derails from what we really should be talking about, which is racism.
True. Amanda wanted to do a little Dear White People.
I do want to say, dear white people, come here. Come a little closer. We're gonna have a chat. It's really important at this moment in time, and I know everybody listening to this already views themselves as an ally, and as someone who considers himself anti-racist. I know that because you wouldn't have gotten this far in our podcast without already feeling that way. But this movement is not about you. Don't take your selfies at protests. Because what you're doing when you take a selfie is performing allyship. Look at me. Look how good I am. It's called virtue signaling. Don't do it. Don't take your selfies. Don't pat yourself on the back. Do the work. Do it quietly. Do it with your family members. And do it for the movement. And if you're not sure why you're posting something or saying something, then ask yourself, why am I doing this and who does it serve? How does it further the movement? So I had to call in a friend recently. It was very hard for me to do because I don't I don't like confrontation in that way. I seem like I'm a pretty confrontational person, and I definitely used to be. But as I've had more issues with anxiety, as I've gotten older, I've gotten less likely to want to confront people about their stupidity or whatever it is they are doing. And I have a friend who's a friend of yours too, I think. I'm not sure. And she's a wonderful person. She's a lesbian. She's done lots of social justice work for a long, long time. She's a white lesbian woman. And she went to one of the protests and then afterwards took a photo, not at the protest. It was like just on a empty street.
Okay.
She took a picture of her and her wife kissing, and then the sign is propped up against their legs, and the sign says, "Stop killing black people," and then posted it.
Oh, okay.
Well, then what does that message send? Well, it centers this white lesbian and her wife kissing over the message of her sign, right? It becomes all about her and her whiteness and her queerness and not about the movement. Mm-hmm. And I don't normally call people in, but I did. I messaged her and I said, "Hey, this is hard for me to write. I'm trying to be better about calling my people in. And so I just need you to know this." And basically what I just said is what I wrote to her. Mm-hmm. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you. You're right." Took down the photo and then replaced the photo with what I had sent her. Which was like, I had so much anxiety about it. And not her posting my message, but just writing the message.
Yeah.
But it was really important to do. And I'm so glad I did it. And I'm so glad that she reacted well, because then it shows that she does get it. And she is on the side of anti-racism. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to say to everybody, and this goes for everyone who is not black, you have to practice anti-racism. It is not something that comes natural to anybody. And it is not a one and done situation. Like you read all of these books and then you're done. That work is constant. It is every single day. And I have fucked up and I have said racist shit, and I will continue to say racist shit because I have been raised in a white supremacist society. And that is ingrained in every single thing I do and say and how the world responds to me. I cannot undo the world. I can only work on myself. And that is hard, hard, hard work.
It is.
So, dear white people, do the fucking work and stay at it. You don't go to one protest and call it good. You don't sign one petition and call it good. You don't make one donation and call it good. You don't have a book club and call it good. Mm-hmm. This is ongoing, extensive, lifelong work to be anti-racist, and it's the most important work I believe you will ever do in your life.
I agree. I agree with the practice. Even myself. You get those first fleeting thoughts of, the first racist thought that pops into your mind, and it's that practice of turning that thought away and checking yourself.
I'm listening to White Fragility right now, and a lot of the concepts that are in the book are not necessarily new to me, but I appreciate the way that they're presented. Like, one of the things that she talks about is that white people don't like to even acknowledge race. Like, she talks about how, like, you might see a mother with their child, a white mother and child in the store, and a black man is also in the same aisle, and the child will say, "Look, mommy, that man's skin is dark." Mm-hmm. And then the mom is like, "Oh my God, don't say that." Or when people, even now, like, Abby's mom will do this all the time, will be like, "Well, yeah, the woman I work with, well, she's black."
Yeah, they whisper it.
Which may seem like the argument might be made, well, that person's just embarrassed that their child pointed out this person's skin color, or, well, I don't want to be perceived as racist by saying the word black. But, like, what are you really saying when you're deciding not to say it?
Mm-hmm. And what's the message? The fear is rooted in what? What are you afraid of?
And it's a lot about like shame, you know, when you're refusing to name what is very visible to everyone who has no visual impairments, you're denying that person's life, their experiences, their identity, the way the world interacts with them. I mean, it is dehumanizing. So acknowledge race. It's okay.
Yeah. I agree.
Speaking of, I have a Black woman today.
Oh.
Who changed like the world. So no biggie.
Just a little something, just changing the world. That's all.
And probably one of the best storytellers I've ever had the pleasure of watching tell a story.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And you are, I believe you're first. So
I am. And I brought a scientist to the table. You know how much I love science.
You do.
I do. No patents on this one, though.
You're falling down on the job, if I'm being honest. If you're not bringing a patent.
You ready?
I am.
I have a feeling you might know my person today. I feel like it's the last season of last episode of season 2, and I feel like this is going to be the one. All right. Do you know who Rosalind Franklin is?
I do. I will say that I don't know much about her, but she's been on my list, so I've looked her up quite a few times.
Okay. So I knew it. I don't know. The universe and I and you, it just goes. So she is a chemist who helped discover the structure of DNA.
That's right. I knew I'd read about her.
So Rosalind was born July 25th in 1920 in Notting Hill, London. Her family was a very well-off Jewish family. Her father, Ellis Arthur Franklin, was a London merchant banker who taught at the city's working men's college. And her mother's name was Muriel, and she was a homemaker. By the way, I love that name, Muriel.
Muriel?
Yeah. Her family had some pull in London. Like, I'll give a couple of examples. Her great uncle Herbert Samuel was the first Jewish man to serve in the British cabinet. Her aunt Helen Carolyn Franklin was married to the Attorney General. So, you know, not too shabby people in the family. Yeah,
she is well connected.
Yes. And her aunt was also a really prominent figure in the suffrage movement that was happening in London. So little to say, she had ballers in the family is what she had. And her father taught the subject of electricity, magnetism, and history at the men's college. And he eventually became the principal there, which I thought was pretty cool.
They had principals?
I guess. Or would you call that like the headmaster or the dean? Or
yeah, the dean. I don't know.
Her family was very active in helping settle displaced Jewish refugees from Europe that had escaped the Nazis, particularly those that had come from the Kindertransport.
Oh.
And I'm pretty sure you're very aware of what that is.
I am.
It's all of the children that were helped to be smuggled out. And so her family actually took in quite a few Jewish children into their own home while they were trying to find them homes to go to.
A lot of those children ended up never, ever finding their families.
Yeah, ever again.
Like, some of them ended up being raised by people and not knowing their whole lives that they weren't in their biological families because no one ever told them. Yeah,
some didn't even know that they were Jewish, right?
Right. They got raised by like Catholic families and never knew. And it became like a family secret that nobody wanted to talk about. I mean, the amount of erasure of your identity is pretty profound. And obviously similar things happened in the United States when Europeans colonized the land and stole Native children from their families and culture forever. It's just so fucked up.
It is. Rosalind's family actually took in two children into their home that they ended up adopting.
That's it's really cool. I hope those kids knew who their parents were. Yeah. Imagine a lot of the kids ended up without families, like their biological families perished. Mm-hmm. So they would have to be adopted.
Yeah, they had to go somewhere. So Rosalind's family, of course, because her dad's a teacher, really encouraged academia. Rosalind was one of 5 kids, and she was one of 2 girls. And her father encouraged academia, but more for the boys, not so much his daughters. But her parents decided to send her to private school in West London. And her aunt said this about her when she was 6 years old. She said, Rosalind was alarmingly clever, which I liked that she used that word.
Yeah. Alarmingly clever. I mean, she pulled some fast ones. That's what
exactly.
That means.
She also played sports. She liked to play cricket and hockey. And even though she was active, there were like hints here and there in the research that I did that she was a little sickly. Like I mentioned it like 3 or 4 times, but never really said what she ailed from. Around the time that she was 9, she entered a boarding school in Lindores. It's the Lindores School for Young Ladies in Sussex. It's quite a title. It's just a school for girls. Call it that.
Yeah. But I think the idea of it being a school for ladies is they're going to turn girls into ladies.
Oh, that's whatever. Fuck that. The school was near the seaside, which they thought would be great for her. They called it her delicate health. So I'm wondering, like, she have asthma or I don't know. Like, why is living near water going to help her?
Oh, there were so many, like, that was like a thing, you know, like when actresses would end up with like painkiller addictions in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they would send them off to like the, you know, Chicotera, and which is all like islands basically.
Oh, geez.
And put them up in these fancy resorts, and it would be like, because the sea air will help them with their addiction to pills.
Just opiates. Okay. Just get some fresh air. That'll help.
The cool sea breeze will cure your ails.
Well, despite them calling her delicate and, you know, sickly, even when she got older, she became like an avid hiker and backpacker. So I don't think she was that bad off. Maybe she had something that they didn't understand, some kind of vitamin deficiency that she wasn't getting.
Maybe she just needed a B12 shot every month, like I do.
True. And she went on to backpack around France. She actually hiked to the French Alps.
Wow, that's impressive.
Needing more of an academic challenge, Rosalind moved on to St. Paul's Girls' School in West London. This school in particular she wanted to go to because it was one of the few schools that taught physics and chemistry. And that was like where her real interest laid in. Her father was not very supportive of her going to this school, so he told her that he wasn't going to pay for it.
What? Yeah. That's a dick move.
Yeah, but you remember her aunt, the one that's married to the attorney general? She ended up fronting her the cash and put her in that school.
At least she had somebody advocating for her.
Yeah. While she was there, she learned German and French fluently, and she was awarded as top of her class. After graduating, she enrolled in Newman College in Cambridge in 1938 to study chemistry. So after 3 years of college, she was awarded what was called a second-class honors in her finals, which is basically, it equals to what we would call a BA right now.
Okay.
She was hired on as an assistant research officer at the British Coal Utilization Research Association. So this is where she studied and I love this word, the porosity of coal.
Porosity? Like, oh, is it like the porousness?
Yeah,
I guess that's called porosity.
So this coal research that she did, she ended up making this the basis of her thesis to be able to receive her PhD in 1945. And the paper was called The Physical Chemistry of Solid Organic Colloids with Specific Reference to coal. So I actually looked up the paper and I researched her thesis. It's fairly long. It's really well written. I'm actually going to go back and read the whole thing. I'm excited about that.
Wow, you get it.
So I know that the porosity of coal doesn't sound very cool, but in her paper, the parts that I read, the reason why this paper was so highly praised and she was able to get a PhD for it was because of how much Britain was depending on coal and had depended on coal during the war. So there was something in it, seriously, for the British people to be able to harness every single thing that coal could possibly do for them.
Interesting.
So she was doing really important research. Also, while doing her research, she was improving her skills on how to measure the density of coal, also of graphite and carbon, which came in handy because when she would start measuring the density of DNA, this is where the basis of that technology came from, is when she started with the coal.
Oh.
And so also she sketched out 2D representations of graphite and coal, which would also be the reason that she was able to draw what would be the double helix DNA strand. So she would take these images and do 2D sketches, but now what we have are 3D images that you can turn around and be able to look at all angles. But she just started off drawing them by hand.
Wow, that's impressive.
In the fall of 1946, Rosalind was appointed, and I'm gonna screw this up, the Laboratoire Central des Services Chimiques d'État in Paris. I don't even know if I said that right. It's a laboratory. It's a school.
And so she was appointed to this school?
Yeah, this is where she worked with a crystallographer called Jacques Maring. There, he taught her X-ray diffraction. It's a very important tool that she could use to determine the atomic and molecular structure of materials. And yes, I did look up what X-ray diffraction was. So what the X-ray diffraction is, it's like, imagine putting a drop of water in a box. You come at it from all angles with X-rays, and the light that bounces off of the drop of water can be measured so that you can learn the structure of the water droplet, if that makes any sense. Kind of like a sonar.
Okay. I think I'm getting it. I don't have a scientific brain, so I'm working hard at this.
It slightly reminded me of, who was that woman who did the map of the ocean bottom?
Oh, Marie Tharp.
Yes. So like similar to like how she used sonar and she would bounce those images and then she would draw and do those 3D maps. You can do similar things with X-rays, but on a molecular level.
I see. Way to tie them together.
You know, I love this kind of shit. So after learning X-ray diffraction, she pioneered the use of X-rays to create images of crystallized solids in analyzing complex, unorganized matter, not just solid crystals. So not just the coal and the graphite. She started doing way more complicated elements. She revolutionized the way that she used the X-rays, which led her to begin working as a research associate at the King's College in London in their biophysics unit. So she's moving her way up the ladder. Her research is becoming very refined. She's using X-rays like nobody's ever used X-rays before. The director of the unit, John Randall, began working with Rosalind and using her X-ray diffraction techniques on DNA fibers. One of her colleagues said this about her. As a scientist, Miss Franklin was distinguished by extreme clarity and perfection in everything she undertook. Her photographs were among the most beautiful X-ray photographs of any substance ever taken. Their excellence was the fruit of extreme care in preparation and mounting of the specimens, as well as in taking of the photographs. So she was
high praise.
Yeah, she was so precise. And she would spend hours. I mean, using x-rays to get this little tiny molecule, you just have to spend hours x-raying at every single angle that you could possibly think of. Rosalind had one student that did research with her, and his name was Raymond Gosling. And while studying DNA, they discovered something quite amazing. And at this time, it was a really big deal because I didn't know that there was an international race between scientists to define what DNA was.
Oh, I don't think I knew that either.
Yeah, I guess there was like US scientists, there was Russian scientists. Everybody was like trying to hurry up and define DNA.
Huh.
So after turning DNA into an image, they discovered that there were two forms of it, a dry A form and a wet B form. One of the X-ray diffraction pictures of the B form of the DNA, she called it photograph 51, which was the first ever and most critical evidence in identifying the structure of DNA. And I looked at the photo and you can see the two strands. It's really cool.
Oh, that's cool. I can't wait till we post that.
The photo that she made, the photo 51, she put in over 100 hours of X-ray exposure from the machine. And at the time, 100 hours in it with X-rays.
One photo.
One photo. At the time, Rosalind was very cautious and she was a diligent researcher. She tried to protect her work. However, she had what she called a personality conflict with one of her colleagues, Maurice Wilkins. And we're not going to like Maurice Wilkins.
No, I vaguely recall this.
So in January 1953, Maurice Wilkins took the research that Rosalind had done and he took her photo 51, and without her permission, he showed it to a competing scientist named James Watson. James Watson was in direct competition with Rosalind, and he was also working on his own DNA model with another researcher named Francis Crick.
Wow, that's so shitty.
Yeah, those two, Crick and Watson, they were stuck. They were not able to produce the image that Rosalind had made. They had done a couple of other sketches that researchers go back now and the sketches are completely wrong. They were flying in fucking left field. So according to author Brenda Maddox, who wrote a book about Rosalind and her research, she said that when Watkins said that he saw the photo of photo 51, he said, "My jaw fell open and my pulse began to race." He took her photo, and Watson and Crick created what is now the first model of DNA, which was published on March 7th in 1953, for which both of these men received a Nobel Peace Prize.
That's what, yeah, not a Peace Prize. They won the Nobel Prize for Science.
Nobel Prize, yes.
Yeah.
Which is bullshit.
Yeah, and her name's not on it.
Nope. So Crick and Watson took all of the credit, and when they published their model in Nature magazine in April 1953, they included a small footnote acknowledging that they were what they called stimulated by a general knowledge of Rosalind's unpublished contribution.
Stimulated by a general knowledge.
Yes.
Sorry, that made me pissed.
Oh, I was so freaking pissed when I heard that. And it's condescending as shit.
Yeah, it is extremely condescending. What the fuck?
So the Cambridge laboratory director published both Rosalind and her student's article in the same issue of Nature, but it was like it was 2 months after Crick and Watson had already put out the news that they had this model, they had discovered life, the building blocks of life or whatever. And so when it was finally published, it just looked like Rosalind was a second hitter.
Yeah, it looked like she was riding their coattails rather than the other way around.
So at this time, it is believed that Rosalind actually had no idea that her photo 51 had been used. In her mind, she just thought that she had been beaten to the punch. And that she had no idea that she had been intentionally betrayed. And other sources say that she knew and that's why she decided to leave King's College. So there's like, it's up for debate, and I'll continue to share with you why it's up for debate. So she left King's College in March 1953, and she relocated to Birkbeck College. Terms with her departure was that she could no longer be in direct competition with King's College, and she would have to leave all of her research on DNA behind, and she could no longer continue researching DNA.
What the fuck?
So she decided to turn her attention back to studying coal, and while working at Birkbeck College, she studied the structure of the tobacco mosaic virus, which tobacco obviously is a very big industry. And there was a virus that was attacking tobacco plants. And so she did research on that, of how to get rid of that virus. And she also worked on the structure of RNA. And in the first 5 years of working at that college, she was able to publish 17 methodical papers on viruses. And her group laid the foundation for structural virology, which I did look up what that was. And that's taking cells, infecting them with a virus, and then studying the progression of the virus, and then finding a cure.
Oh, like what we need right now.
Exactly. Like she worked with polio research, and she actually was like, I don't want dead cells of polio. I want you to give me live polio, because then I can know how it will really work. So she was working in like this super, like they put her in like a suit and contained her because she was working with like actual diseases, because she wanted her research to be correct.
Which is the right way to do it, but dangerous.
Very. In 1956, while getting dressed one day, she says she felt an odd lump in her abdomen. So going to the doctor, they discovered that she had 2 severely large tumors in her abdomen. She had ovarian cancer.
Oh, no.
And it's pretty much tied to all of her exposure to the x-rays is probably what gave her cancer.
That's right.
So in the next 2 years, she continued to work, and she had 3 operations, multiple rounds of chemo and experimental chemo, but none of it was working. Her closest friends say that she worked up till her last days. She was still very diligent on finishing her research, and she died on April 16th in 1958 at the age of 37.
Oh my God. Oh,
She
did so much.
Young.
And like so young. Like I am going to be 37 in 2 months.
Yeah. So after her death and throughout the decades, the controversy surrounding her stolen work has been twisted and turned. So one of her best friends, her name is Anne Sayre, she wrote a biography about Rosalind, and it's called Rosalind Franklin and DNA. In the book, she calls out the college, and she calls out the 2 men that benefited from her research. After that was released, other women from the college stood up and spoke out, saying that the college was extremely sexist. They stated
Obviously.
that women were treated unfairly. They were often doubted. They were socially cast out. Their research would be submitted and all of a sudden missing. So women at the college also stated that they witnessed the patronizing attitude that Crick and Watson had towards Rosalind. They would tease her and call her Rosie. They're like, hey, Rosie. And she's like, that's not my name. And they would, stupid high school shit like that.
Those are like microaggressions,
Yes. And making it an unsafe workplace for her.
Yeah.
This one kind of gets under my skin. In a book that Watson actually wrote, 10 years after Rosalind's death, he describes her as belligerent, emotional, and unable to translate her own data.
Oh my God. The audacity.
After she passed away, he's writing this.
Also, you know why she was probably belligerent? Because you're a fucking motherfucker.
Yes. And then all of a sudden, oh, you're emotional. Yeah, I'm fucking pissed.
Yeah. I always hate when women who finally get fed up and like call shit out are then the problem because they're too emotional.
Yeah. Or you're angry.
That's compounded for Black women because there's a whole racist stereotype about the angry Black man and the angry Black woman. So they've got it even worse. So the minute they finally, after like being poked with 25,000 needles, finally go, you know what? That's not cool with me. Oh my God, why are you so angry?
You're so aggressive right now.
I'm so angry because of you.
So Crick and Watson were called out for stealing her data, which they both obviously denied. They claimed, so this is what happened. They claimed that photo 51 was fairly given to them because Rosalind was already leaving the college. And her friend was like, no, she left the college because you stole her fucking photo.
Yeah. That seems like obviously here's the event and the cause.
Yes. Why would she have this amazing photo that she knew would change the history of DNA and what we knew about it and be like, you know what? I'm going to go. And the college that she went to had half the funds that this other college had for research. She even said sometimes they'd walk into the building and the floors would be flooded. Like, it was dumpy.
Yeah. And
it doesn't make any sense.
It also, like, that's why that guy said that she couldn't translate her work. Because if he could admit that she knew how to translate her own work, then he would also have to admit that he fucking stole her work. Mm-hmm. So if they make it sound like she was an idiot and a belligerent one at that, who didn't even know how to interpret her own research, well, then they can get away with not feeling bad about having stolen her work.
Yep. And just make it look like, oh, we were able to interpret it. She wasn't.
Mm-hmm. She had to give us the photo. How else would the science continue? She couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, as far as sexism, Crick and Watson said that the men and women were treated as scientists alike.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But everything was so fucking perfect, wasn't it?
It was so great, I'm sure. So why can't we all just get along?
Today, Rosalind's work is undeniable. She was the pioneer in the discovery of the double helix DNA strand. She posthumously received multiple honors and recognition for her research at King's College. Sadly, she wasn't able to be alive when people started actually acknowledging that, no, this was her. This was hers.
So frustrating.
So around the world now, I had to just do this short little thing because there was such a long list. So laboratories, awards, medical software, hospitals, a space rover, an entire medical institute and research center, all now are named after Rosalind Franklin. In 2019, a building at the University of Portsmouth that was dedicated to Watson, that asshole, it was renamed after Rosalind.
That's what I hope all of those, like, you know, like Confederate general bullshit. I hope all of that shit gets renamed as like civil rights leaders.
Erase it. Yeah. So the Rosalind Franklin STEM Elementary was opened in Pasco, Washington in 2014.
Oh, wow.
I know. I saw that. I was like, hey, that's down the road. There are neighbors.
That's just down the road.
So I got my info from bio.com and a website / blog called nerdfightia.info. Wikipedia, massivescience.com. And then I got a lot of information from the book by Brenda Maddox titled Rosalind Franklin, the Dark Lady of DNA.
Very cool. I had thought about doing her before, and I just was like, I'm not as into science. So I'm glad you did her because I knew she was so important. It was actually a friend of mine at the high school I work at is a science teacher, and he was the one who was like, have you heard of her? You should cover her on the podcast. So that's the only reason I even knew who she was because of him.
That's cool.
And he has a poster of her on his classroom wall, which I really appreciate.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Now that I know more about her, I think it's great that he's like, hey, this lady.
Well, you know, I've always loved science, and I've loved, I don't know, I like attention to detail. and science is very detail oriented. So I did have a lot of fun of learning the porosity of coal.
I love that you're going to read that entire scientific paper.
It needs some reading.
Yeah, just some light, afternoon, summer reading.
A thesis, a PhD thesis. Why not? I feel like I want to read what she had to offer.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
I agree.
All right. Who do you have today?
I'm going to tell you the story of Raye Montague.
I don't know her.
She was the first female program manager of ships for the U.S. Navy and created the first computer-generated rough draft of a ship.
Cool.
Yeah. So we have like similar ladies, really.
Okay.
Working in extremely male-dominated industries, doing something for the first time and being doubted for their skills. So this is a very common refrain in this story as well. And her name is Raye. That's not short for anything. It is just straight up Raye. Raye.
Okay.
Her name is, she was born Raye Jean Jordan on January 21st, 1935 to her parents, Rayford and Flossie Jordan in Little Rock, Arkansas.
These are really fun names. I like it.
I love Flossie. That's a great name.
Yeah.
It's so very like 1920s to me.
Mm-hmm.
So Raye came from a very well-educated black family. When she was being interviewed by NAVSEA, which is the Naval Sea Systems Command, I'm going to mention NAVSEA a little bit. So that's an acronym that stands for Naval Sea Systems Command. So she did this really long interview with them. It's in 2 parts. Each one of them is like 30 minutes long. I watched every minute of it more than once. She is terrific. You should all listen and watch those. But she talked about how her grandfather, the first person in her family to get a college education was her great uncle, her grandmother's brother, in 1902, which was 37 years after slavery was outlawed.
Wow.
Yeah, like that's really impressive. And he then went on to graduate from medical school in 1910.
Whoa.
And so this man had, his parents had been, I believe, in slavery, and he became a medical doctor 50 years after that. Raye's mother, Flossie, was also a college graduate, and she pushed Raye to be a good student. Her parents' marriage, however, didn't last very long, and they separated when Raye was around 4 years old. After the divorce, Raye really didn't see her father. He was kind of an absentee father, and that meant that Flossie raised Raye. And I'm not sure if she had siblings. I couldn't really find information on that. I believe she did, because I think I saw somewhere that her brother had died before her. But that means that Flossie was a single mom. And even though she had a 4-year college degree, finding work as a black woman in the 30s in Little Rock, Arkansas was very difficult.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that Little Rock, Arkansas, if you haven't heard of the story of like the Little Rock Nine, Little Rock was a pretty contentious place in the country as far as segregation and racism and Jim Crow and all that shit was concerned. The Little Rock Nine were the 9 students who enrolled in an all-white school, and it was awful. Mm-hmm. So she's growing up in that, and Flossie is trying to raise her as a single mother in this situation. And so Flossie ends up she runs a cosmetology business. So luckily Raye, though, had a really strong, close relationship with her grandfather, and he saw something very unique in her. And I want to let Raye talk about how an experience with her grandfather is what ultimately set up the trajectory of her entire life. And it changed American history forever.
I love it. Now, what made you want to become an engineer?
Okay, when I was 7 years old, this is World War II, the United States captured a German mini-submarine, a miniature submarine, a one-man sub off of the coast of the Carolinas. And they brought it to downtown Little Rock, Arkansas, where I lived. And my grandfather took me down to see it. He had other grandchildren, but he only took me. They let me go up the little ladder and down the hatch, and I looked at all the dials and the mechanisms and looked through the periscope, and I said, wow, what do you have to know to do this? Well, the guy giving the spiel said, you'd have to be an engineer, but you don't ever have to worry about that. Well, I didn't realize I'd been insulted. So I went home and I told my mother what he said. And she said, Raye, you'll have 3 strikes against you. You're female, you're black. At that time, the terminology was Negro. And you have a Southern segregated school education. But you can be or do anything you want to be. My mother knew what she was talking about.
She seems like quite a character.
Do you see what I mean about being a storyteller?
Yeah.
I watched her tell that story in no less than 6 videos, and every single time I was like, yes! So Raye really held to that conviction of wanting to become an engineer after seeing that submarine. Raye attended the all-black St. Bartholomew School as a child, and she frequently told another story whenever I was listening to interviews with her. She told another story of what it was like when she was in class in middle school, when all of the students are like, I want to be this when I grow up, or my goal is to become a doctor, or my goal is to become a lawyer. She said when she grew up, she wanted to be an engineer, and all of the students laughed at her because they thought that an engineer was the guy who ran the trains, right? Which is what they were called, right? They're called engineers. And they had no idea that like engineering could go beyond just conducting trains. And so she got pretty hurt by this. And her teacher, I believe her name was Mrs. Holliday, pulled her aside after class and told her, you know, you can do anything you want to do. And she told her to shoot for the stars because even if she doesn't land, even if she doesn't make it, she'll land on the moon. And I want you to keep that in mind because it's going to come back later. When Raye finished her schooling at St. Bartholomew and then went to Merrill High School, again an all-black high school, she ran into some issues with the classes that they were required to take. Girls were required to take 4 years of home ec.
Whoa. Required?
Required. Every year of high school, you had to learn how to cook and sew.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with a home ec class, by no means.
No,
I don't
think it should be required, though, of you.
And only girls. And she wanted to take a shop class, but they were for boys only. They told her she couldn't take shop. She had to take home ec. So Raye's mother, who was actually, I think, a pretty feisty woman herself, based on how Raye described her, that when her mother was sent in to take care of something, it was taken care of. which reminds me a lot of my own mother, who, if it got to the point where my mom was willing to come to the school, boy, you better watch out. So her mom went into the school and really was demanding that her child be allowed to take the shop class. Like, it shouldn't matter. But the school was insistent, and they said the only way that they would let Raye take shop instead of home ec is if she passed all of the home ec tests without ever seeing their textbook or being in class. So she and her mom went home. They studied all of the things, and she talked to her about cooking and this and that. And then she took the test the next day and passed with flying colors.
Oh, wow.
And so she was allowed to take shop classes, which is great because that's what she really needed and wanted to do in order to become an engineer. After she graduated high school in 1952, she wanted to enroll in the engineering program at the University of Arkansas because that was the only university at the time that had an engineering program in Arkansas, in the entire state. But they didn't accept black students.
course not.
So instead, Raye attended the Arkansas Agricultural, Mechanical, and Normal College, which
college?
I know, I thought that was real weird. And that's a historical black college, and it's now known as the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. But that university didn't have an engineering program, so Raye ended up getting a degree in business. The day after she graduated college, she got on a train headed for Washington, D.C., because she figured that if she wanted to become an engineer, D.C. would be the place that she would be able to do that. So the first place that hired her was the first place she applied to, and that was the United States Navy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which I thought was actually pretty cool. Despite having a 4-year degree, which I don't know if you're very familiar with government jobs, especially with like the military or whatever, but government jobs all have these like rankings, and like, you know, if you don't have a college degree or whatever, you're going to start at the very, very bottom. So that's where they put her, even though she did have a 4-year degree. And she was working.
Confusing.
Well, yeah, it's because she was a woman and because she was black.
Oh, I see.
Because if she had been a white man with that same degree, they wouldn't have started they wouldn't have started the man at the bottom. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have started him as a clerk typist, which is what she started at.
And she's got a degree in business.
Yes, she has a degree in business, but even though that's her degree, like the courses she took were like physics and all of these like important scientific stuff because she wanted to become an engineer.
Yeah.
So Raye's job as this clerk typist was to type out the findings each day from one of the country's first computers. It was called the UNIVAC 1. It took up an entire room.
Oh, yeah.
So every day she watched this computer engineer who would come to work at this machine, and he would push all these buttons and pull all these levers and whatever, and it would create these readings, and out the readings would come as like some kind of tape. And then she would have to translate the tape into typed, like, this is what this says.
Oh, I think I've seen that before, where it's a big, long white tape. Almost looks like when you used to get messages over Morse code. Like that kind of tape.
Yeah, it's got something like that. And that's what she was supposed to do, was to take the tape and then type out what the findings were. So she asked the man once when he was running it if he would teach her how to run this computer. And he said, no, if I tell you how to run it, then I don't have a job anymore.
To be fair.
And I don't know why this happened, but one day all of the engineers called in sick. All of them.
She poisoned them all.
So Raye was just standing at this computer waiting for someone to show up to run it so she could do her job. And there was no one there to run the machine. And when she found out they were all sick, she was like, well, I'm going to give this a shot. So she just started pushing the same buttons that she watched this guy do day after day and pulling the levers and doing the thing. And, you know, she had all of these white coworkers, most of whom were men, who are like watching her, and they're like, what the fuck? Uh-oh. So they go to her boss and they snitch, and they're like, hey, you know, that black lady is at the computer. Did you know that? So her boss comes out and he's like, Raye, I didn't know you knew how to work the computer. And she said, I don't.
That's pretty ballsy.
But then the readings came out like they had done before. And her boss was like, well, now this is your job.
Oh, wow.
So she did replace that guy. And so she became a digital computer systems operator. While she worked every day, all day, she would then take computer programming classes at night.
Ooh, girl.
Yep, she was getting herself prepared to apply for job promotions as they came up. After working at the computer for a year, Raye asked for a promotion, but her boss was not in the mood to promote her. He said that the only way that she would be able to get a promotion is if she worked nights. So here was the thing about working nights. Where they were, the bus didn't run late. So if she wanted to work the night shift, she didn't have a way to get there because she didn't have a car and she didn't know how to drive. So there was literally no way for her to get there.
Yeah.
So that day, she left work, went to a used car lot, and she bought a 1949 Pontiac for $375. And she convinced the salesman to drive the car home because, remember, she can't drive.
She didn't know how to drive. Oh, my gosh.
So the next night, when it was time for her to go to work and drive this car, well, so she tells the guy, like, hey, I have a car now. I can go to the night shift. And he was like, all right, then, come to the night shift. So the next night, when it's time for her to drive this car to work,
yeah,
she got behind the wheel at 10 p.m. and she joked that she went no miles per hour. she just like creeped along and 2 hours later arrived at the office. It's normally like a 25-minute drive.
Oh no. Well, she just played it safe, you know?
Yeah. She volunteered for the midnight shift. And so she would stay later than she was supposed to. This is great. So she would go to the midnight shift, which was supposed to end, I think, at 8 a.m. or whatever. And she would just hang around and help people out and get things set up and do all this other stuff. And everybody just thought she was like putting in extra time because she was such a hard worker. But it was really because she wanted to miss the rush hour traffic.
Oh, because she just wanted to make sure that she could...
Because she couldn't drive in the
take
rush
her
hour.
own pace. Oh, jeez.
So she would leave, right? And then go home. So after a few months of doing this, she'd gotten a phone call from her mom that someone in her family had died. So she decided to go back to Arkansas for this funeral. And while she was in Arkansas, there was a family friend who was like, I hear you've been driving. I hear you have a car. And she was like, yeah, I do. And he was like, when'd you get your license? And she was like, I don't have my license. And he was like, do you want one? And she was like, yeah, I sure do. And he like hooked her up and got her a driver's permit through the state of Arkansas. And so when she got back to DC, she was like showing it off to all of her coworkers. She's like, look, I got a driver's permit. Oh my God. And her boss came out and was like, well, why are you showing that off? Of course you have a driver's license. You've been driving this whole time. And she was like, no, I didn't have a license. He was like, but you've been driving this whole time. And she's like, yep. But he was like, wow, this is like a lot of dedication to go to like illegally be driving this car every single night without.
Yeah.
And like he said like, well, why didn't you ever get a license? And she said, I didn't know how to drive. And he was like, well, then how you been driving? And she was like, I taught myself. Which is basically what she's also doing with her engineering stuff. She's teaching herself every day to be better at her job. So he decided to promote her. She says it's because of this dedication, that he saw how dedicated she was. When she went to work at the Naval Ship Engineering Center, this is her new place, her new boss rushed into the room and was like, hey, I'm here to meet the new guy. Because her name is Raye, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, shit. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
That was another reason why she got hired. Every time she got hired somewhere, people thought she was a man. Oh. Because she wouldn't do anything to ever reveal her gender in her paperwork or in her resume and her applications. So this new boss rushes into the engineering center and is like, hey, I'm here to meet the new guy. And she thrusts her hand out and she's like, that's me. And his face just crumbles. Because not a new guy. It's in fact a woman. And on top of that, a black woman. Mm-hmm. And he was racist.
Shit a brick.
Yep, he's racist. He's sexist. This is not going well for him. And so he was determined to do whatever he could to throw up obstacles in her path. Mm. And he was openly racist. Very, like, she doesn't talk a lot about the racism that she faced, but she does talk about little microaggressions, like when they would call a meeting and she'd walk in the room, some guy would be like, oh yeah, can I get a cup of coffee? And she was like, I don't know. Can you grab me one too? So this new boss assigns her to a problem project that the Navy had been working on for 6 years.
Oh, so it is a nut to be cracked.
Yes, they had already poured more than $600,000 into this particular project.
Yikes.
And, you know, as she points out, rightfully so, that at the time, this is a lot of fucking money. 600,000 today would be, you know, 6 million. So they've had no success. So here's what the problem is. This is what she is supposed to do without having an engineering degree, but having taught herself everything she's done. He wants her to figure out how to use a computer to design a naval ship from the ground up.
Computer. Okay.
This is before
That's...
computers were really able to do stuff like this.
Yeah.
So they'd had teams of engineers for 6 years working on how to develop a program to do this. No one's had any luck. It's been terrible. So he says she has 6 months to solve this.
Oh, jeez. Or else?
Yeah, basically. Or else. Or else her career is over. She's not going to go any higher. And so, of course, that's intentionally setting her up for failure, right? And he knew that. He knew that he was intentionally setting her up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
But he underestimated how fucking smart this bitch was. So she had heard that there was a naval architecture firm, a private naval architecture firm in New York City that had made some headway on the issue. So on her own dime, she traveled to New York City and she met with one of the guys from this naval architecture firm, and he went through everything with her about the process of what they'd been doing. And she realizes that in order for them to solve what's going on, she has to take apart the entire computer and rebuild it from the ground up.
Oh my gosh.
And doing that's going to take time. Remember, these are not the computers of 2020. These are computers that fill an entire room. So taking it apart bit by bit and putting it back together is going to take a lot of time and a lot of people.
It's like taking a car apart.
Yes, exactly. Imagine taking a car apart and putting it back together and also creating the program that's going to do the thing you need it to do. So in order to meet her deadline, that means that she needed to also work at night, work day and night. But her new boss is like, oh, no, you can't do that. Not unless you have somebody here with you. I'm not going to allow you to work here alone. So Raye asked every colleague if they would work at night with her. And all of them said no, because there was no overtime. He wouldn't allow anybody to get any extra hours, paid hours. Everybody had to do it on their own volunteer time. And so all of her colleagues were like, fuck that, I'm not doing that. And she was like, but wait, if you help me with this, like, I think I know how to fix this. If you help me with this, you're going to look good. And you're going to get all the overtime in the future that you want. You're going to get a pay raise. They're going to think you're a shining star. And they were like, nah, lady, you don't know what you're doing. So no one agreed. But she still had this problem. He said she could not be in there alone.
Mm-hmm.
So Raye brought in her son, David, who was then 3 years old, and also brought her mother, who would sit in the corner and do crossword puzzles.
If it fits, she's not alone.
And her mom was also there to help take care of David so that Raye could work while they were there. So after several nights of this, after her boss had heard that she had been bringing in her son and mother, he pulled her aside and was like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you bringing your son and your mother to work with you? And she said, because you told me I couldn't be here alone, so I'm not alone. And he recognized then, like, she is very determined and very motivated, and I can't have her coming in every night with her brother and her son. So, and he was like, do you really think you can solve this? Do you really think you can do this? And she showed him all of her plans and everything that she was doing. And she was like, yes, I understand what needs to be done in order to make this work. And she talked him through it. He finally realized that maybe she was onto something. So he assigned a staff to come in every night from 4 to 12 to work with her. And Raye did what no one else in the Navy had done before. She solved the problem and opened the gateway to designing ships faster and more precisely, and was able to show that you could design a ship from the ground up with using a computer.
Wow. Good for her.
And that's exactly what she set her sights on. She wanted to design her own ship from the ground up using the computer program that she just fucking built.
Gosh, I can't even imagine. Like, she doesn't know anything about computers.
Until she does. Until she teaches herself.
Until she does. Yeah.
So she asked her boss, like, hey, when am I going to be able to design my own ship? And he laughed at her. And he was like, nobody's ever going to give you a ship to design.
Oh. Now he just made her want it even more.
That's right. So Nixon, who was president at the time, heard about this engineer who had solved a 6-year-long problem in less than 6 months. And he turned to the Navy and he said, look, I want a ship that can do this, this, and this, and I want it in 2 months. Because this is during the Vietnam War.
Oh, shit.
When the orders were passed down to Raye Montague, they went from being a 2-month task sent to the Navy, and now it's being sent to her, and it has to be done in 1 month. And I just want to say that prior to this, the average ship design from start to finish took more than 2 years.
Oh,
she has 1 month to do this.
That is so risky.
So Raye not only finished her rough draft of the ship's design in less than a month using her computer, she did it in less than 24 hours.
What? No.
This is her exact quote. I brought that rascal in at 18 hours and 26 minutes.
Holy shit.
And
that is amazing.
She's so incredible. And she's very funny. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. She is so funny and brazen. So she made up a homemade birth certificate for this ship. And like put the name of the ship on it, and then like put the mother as herself, and like left that birth certificate on her desk and went home for the night. And she was exhausted because she'd worked on that for 18 hours straight, 19 hours straight. So she like ended up sleeping in, and it was like on a Friday, Saturday situation. She slept all day Sunday and then was late for work the next day because she accidentally overslept. When she came in, everybody's like, what the fuck? You're just sleeping on the job? Like, what the hell? And she was like, didn't you see my desk? I already did it. And then like they go over and they pick up the birth certificate, and they were like, what the hell is this? And she was like, that's my baby. I gave birth last night. So she did it. And that meant that Raye Montague became the first woman to ever design a ship for the U.S. Navy, and the first person ever to create a computer-generated rough draft of a ship. The ship she designed went on to be known as the Oliver Hazard Perry, or the FFG-7 frigate. Frigate. I meant to look that up and forgot. I don't know.
Frigate?
There you go. That one.
There you go.
I meant to look up that pronunciation and totally forgot. For this achievement in 1972, Raye was awarded the U.S. Navy's Meritorious Civilian Service Award, which is the third highest honorary award in the Navy.
Wow. And
after that, her career opened up pretty widely, though not without obstacles, obviously, because she is a woman and is black. And there were also some big surprises. That racist-ass boss who like kept throwing the worst obstacles possible in front of her.
Yeah.
After what she did, he was like, this woman has balls. And he decided that instead of standing in her way, he wanted to help her. And he said, what do you want to do next? And she said, I want your job. And he said, there's a lot of men around here who also want my job, but none of them have the balls to tell me.
Oh, wow.
And so he spent every lunch hour mentoring her on how to do his job.
What a way to step off of that high horse and realize the potential that is there.
It's upsetting that she had to be so exceptional in order for him to want to mentor her, but the fact that he did is good because he really did open up doors for her and was able to qualify her for the job because she technically didn't have an engineering degree. But because
not only of like her being able to reach her goals, but the benefit to society of the things that she can create.
I appreciated that he saw what he should have seen all along. Eventually he got there. She also talked about, what do people do for the busiest people in the room? They give them the most work. And so they also tasked her with leading a federal women's program to create more opportunities for women. So she had to head up this entire program while also working her full-time job.
Jeez. I would die from that much work. I would lay
too.
face down on the floor and give up.
No, thank you.
No.
So the entire time she's working full-time as a computer systems analyst, she is also mentoring women and opening up the doors for women in the Navy, which she did in her, quote, spare time. And Raye was promoted again to the program director of the Naval Sea Systems Command Integrated Design, Manufacturing, and Maintenance Program, which I believe was the boss that she had before, who then got promoted to sergeant above her. So I think she really did get his job. She also headed up, do you remember CAD?
CAD?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like computer architecture design, I believe.
Maybe.
Or computer automated design. Anyway, everybody's going to be mad at me that I didn't write that down. But I was like, I remember CAD as a program because it was something that boys took in my class, in my school when I wasn't going to school. Boys took CAD classes and they learned how to design things in CAD. So she was in charge of the CAD CAM program as well for the Navy. And if I'd known as a young teen that a woman had been in charge of the CAD CAM program, I would have maybe pursued it. I don't know if I ever told you this, but that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in computers.
Oh,
and my teacher told me that wasn't meant for me. It was for boys.
Gross.
And instead of pushing on that, like the women we often cover on this show, I just said, okay, and didn't take it. He wanted me to take graphic design instead. And I was like, well, I'm not interested in graphic design. I wanted to learn how to write programs. I wanted to learn language and stuff like that.
I wanted to be a scientist. I came to the day where you can dress up in a profession, and my mom got me a lab coat, and I had brought my microscope from home. My principal, she walks up to me, "What are you?" I said, "I want to be a scientist." And she says, "Why would you want to do that? That's dumb." Literally.
Dumb.
Yeah. She was like, "That's something you could never do." And she broke my heart.
And that's the thing. We often on this show talk about these women who have the same obstacles thrown up and then they overcome them. But I think it's important to remember that not everyone can be exceptional. But that doesn't mean that they don't have something to offer the world. And that principle crushed your dream. And it probably made you even at the moment you might have been like, well, screw her. You internalize that stuff. We all internalize that stuff. So when that teacher in high school was like, nah, I don't think this is for you, I internalized that and I really fucking believed it. And I never did go further than I had to, I guess, to actually be in computers, which is what I wanted to do. It was one of the things I wanted to do. I was very interested in. So as if all of that isn't enough, right? She's heading up this women's program. She's the program director of the NAVSEA Command in Design and Manufacturing and Maintenance Program and the CAD CAM program. Okay. She's also at this point teaching computer classes at the Naval Academy.
Wow.
So one project she ends up working on is a spacecraft that was sent to the moon. And once it landed, it was supposed to take a soil sample. So it had this retractable arm. And of course, it's computer code that tells the robot what to do. Unfortunately, the arm went out, but then it wouldn't come back in. And so Raye was called in to help the original designer work on it. And they spent days and days working on it. And she said she doesn't remember who actually solved the problem. It might have been the original guy, but it did get fixed. And so once it was it completed its mission, there were newspaper articles about it, and they included like quotes from her and stuff like that. So she found one of those newspapers and clipped out the article and sent it to her 8th grade teacher, Mrs. Holliday, with a note that said, "I've been to the moon, baby."
Oh, I love that so much.
Raye climbed higher in the ranks and eventually became the deputy program manager of the Navy's Information Systems Improvement Program, which is the civilian equivalent of a captain, the first woman to ever achieve so high a rank. After years of dedicating herself to the Navy and its shipbuilding program, she at last had the opportunity to apply for SES, which was a senior executive service. It's one of the highest designations that a civilian can achieve in the Navy. Here's what the Navy itself says makes someone eligible for an SES. Someone who, quote, possesses exceptional executive skills and brings diverse portfolios to the Navy.
Awesome.
She's perfect for this, right?
Yeah.
So she's poised to get this SES. She's put in her application, and it's been provisionally granted to her by her captain. And this would make her the first female SES and the first African-American SES. In the middle of the review of her application, her captain retired, and she kept on doing what she was normally doing. And then when the new staffing plan came out, her SES was gone.
What?
And it was just gone. They just didn't put it on there anymore.
That's weird.
And she tried to argue about it and fight about it, but they just wouldn't do it. And after 33 years of serving the Navy, Raye Montague retired without her SES designation.
Aw.
However, over the course of her career, she became the first female professional engineer to receive the Society of Manufacturing Engineers Achievement Award, the National Computer Graphics Association Award for the Advancement of Computer Graphics, and a number of other awards and honors from the military branches. She worked on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and the first landing craft helicopter assault ship and the Seawolf submarine. Some of the ships that she designed are still in use by our U.S. Navy today.
Wow. That's really neat.
After retirement, Raye moved back to Arkansas, where she continued to be a mentor and active member of her community. She actually even did mentoring classes at the local prison. So when the movie Hidden Figures came out in 2017, we all remember that, which highlighted the achievements of these Black mathematicians, these women who helped get John Glenn into space, there was now this collective renewed interest in Raye Montague's story. And so there were all kinds of articles that were written about her all over the place, and she got to go on Good Morning America. And during her appearance on Good Morning America, Janelle Monáe came on and thanked Raye for her service. It's such a good, if you have the opportunity, just Google Raye Montague Good Morning America, because it's great. Raye Montague died on October 9th, 2018 of congestive heart failure. She was 83 years old. Oof. Raye Montague is a testament to the perseverance and resilience that so many Black women have been forced to cultivate in order to succeed. And while Raye Montague did succeed, greatly even, it's infuriating that her contributions were overlooked for so long. And we can all imagine what the barriers of racism and sexism were like for her. And it is pretty remarkable that she was able to achieve everything she did. But I think it's also important to note that we need to do whatever we can to break down those kinds of barriers, because one should not have to be exceptional in order to be successful. So that's her story, a real life hidden figure.
Oh, that was wonderful.
I use the Arkansas Women's Hall of Fame. Harry Connick Jr. had a show, I guess, or something. Anyway, it was called Leading Lady. That's the clip I gave you.
Okay.
Wikipedia. Raye Montague, a barrier-breaking naval ship designer, has died at 83 by Bridget Katz for SmithsonianMagazine.com. The African American Registry, the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. Meet the Woman Who Broke Barriers as a Hidden Figure at the U.S. Navy by Sharday Miller for ABCNews.com. I used that Good Morning America clip. Raye Montague, the Navy's hidden figure ship designer, dies at 83 by Catherine Q. Seeley for the New York Times. Raye Montague, the hidden figure who revolutionized naval ship design by Catherine for A Mighty Girl. And my favorite, which is really the one I used the most from, was a conversation with Raye Montague on NavC's YouTube channel.
Very cool.
I loved her.
Like it.
Powerful.
That was really awesome. What a way to end season 2, huh?
I know. What a way to end it. Don't worry, everybody. We're not going away. We will be back. But also, I'm hoping to do some special stuff over the summer, little bonuses that we'll release periodically. We're also going to revamp our website and hopefully start up our merchandise store while we're on our break. And we're looking
and maybe see each other in real life.
Yeah, we're looking at maybe seeing each other.
Mm-hmm.
So look forward to all of those big, hopefully, fingers crossed, big things to come.
And thank you so much if you're listening to this episode, for sticking with us this long. You have no idea how much it means to both of us.
It really is phenomenal, and we feel so uplifted and supported by you. The messages you send us. It's just wonderful to have a community like we do. So thank you for listening.
All right. On that note, we'll also like to thank Lucas McIntyre, our editor, for sticking with us through another season. And with all the bumps and bruises we do.
Yeah, especially right now.
Mm-hmm.
And also thank you to Jennifer Finch of L7 for use of the lovely Shirley from their Hungry for Stink album, which you should download today.
All right. We will see you in season 3.
Hey, are you ready for the clap?